my channel. I am Linda and I'm a healer, a coach, and a facilitator. And in this channel, I give you clarity about emotional intelligence and practical spirituality subjects and how you can use them in your day-to-day to create a more meaningful, fulfilling, and joyful life. So the video that I'm recording today is going to be a video in a series that I am working on that is all about the subconscious mind. It is all related to understanding the subconscious, working with the subconscious, etc. So that's how we go from trauma to core wound to core belief. Now, once the core belief is ingrained, once the core belief is there, what that does is it gives rise to a defense mechanism. Now, a defense mechanism is a subconscious strategy that we create. It is a subconscious process that we create in order to protect ourselves. And it is subconscious because most of us are not aware of it. So there are tons of defense mechanisms, and a lot of people are familiar with a lot of them because they're used in our day-to-day language. There's projection, and there's sublimation, and sublimation is probably not that common, but there's denial, there's projection, etc. Right? A lot of people are familiar with a lot of the different types of defense mechanisms that are out there. In my case, if I continue using my own personal example, the defense mechanism, so my core wound was abandonment. The core belief that I created as a result of that abandonment, that core wound, is that I was unlovable, right? So the defense mechanism that I created as a result of that core belief is that I wasn't going to allow myself to connect with someone. So that all these defense mechanisms get created at a subconscious level as a way to protect us from hurt, protect us from more wounding, from injury, but they actually in fact perpetuate that injury, because the reason why the wound is there is because we have that need or that desire. Now, coping mechanisms or coping strategies are strategies, behaviors that we take in an attempt to reduce or minimize the distress that we feel that is caused by intense unresolved emotions, right? In psychology circles and the self-help, self-development community, coping strategies are believed to be healthy. I will not necessarily agree with that personally. I will say that I believe they are healthier because they imply being the key word, that you already have some awareness of what it is that you're trying to manage, right? What it is that you are feeling and what it is that you're trying to reduce the stress from. So in that sense, they are a little bit healthier, and they're also a little bit healthier in the sense that we are taking conscious action to reduce or minimize that level of distress. The reason why I don't think they are healthy is because it is still trying to reduce or minimize the stress without actually addressing the root cause of that pain or that hurt, in this case, the core wound. When we are in this subconscious cycle, we are attracting circumstances, people, energies, right, that are actually continuously perpetuating the cycle, and we are doing it in a subconscious attempt to resolve the original trauma, right? To resolve that core wound. And that's really what oftentimes the trigger is, right? Is a situation that brings you back to that original trauma, and you react to it with a lot of energy, with a lot of emotion, sometimes with a level of emotion that is not commensurate to the event itself. It's not, and that is not because you're a drama queen or because the event was so intense. It's because that event, you're assigning it meaning and you're linking it to the original core wound. So as we're talking about the subconscious mind, we also have to get a little bit into the topic of emotions. And that brings us to talk a little bit about cover emotions and secondary emotions. I want to cover that just a little bit because I think it's an important piece to understand when we're talking about this process. Now, Emotions specifically are energy and motion. And again, I'm not trying to plug the channel, but I do have a video about emotions, and I think it's called Feelings versus Emotions, or Emotions versus Feelings, whatever. But it explains my interpretation of how emotions work, how they get created, etc. So if you want more information about that, you can go to that video. But just suffice it to say that emotions are energy and motion, and are basically our physical expression of how we interpret stimuli. And the idea of cover emotions or secondary emotions is that they're basically emotions about emotion. So one example that I can give is, say you grew up in an environment where your parents are, very stoic and very like the type of people that, are not very comfortable expressing emotion, right? And you, when you were a child, when you got nervous or you got scared or you get anxious, they immediately discourage that behavior, right? Or you feeling that way. They would say something like, oh, there's nothing to feel scared about, or there's nothing to be nervous about, or why are you nervous? You shouldn't be nervous, or no, you need to act this way. Don't show people that you're nervous or whatever, right? So you learn at a very young age that showing fear, that showing anxious, the fact that you were anxious or showing nervousness was something that was not okay. So in your adult life, every time you feel anxious or feel fearful, the way it shows up is as shame, because you are feeling shame about the fact that you're feeling fearful or anxious. So so in this case, shame would be the cover emotion. Now, there are several cover emotions that are usually several emotions that go together. There's several emotions that the primary emotion is more often than not linked to a specific secondary emotion, but this can be different for a lot of people, right? So the fact that you feel anxious and shame about being anxious can be very specific to some people, but not to others. But there are certain things, like for example, anger is usually a secondary emotion for fear. It's still an emotion, but oftentimes when people are really angry, what they're feeling more deeply is the fear. Same thing with hatred. Normally when people feel hatred is usually a secondary emotion for hurt. So there are certain things that go together, not always, but in general. So normally when someone is angry, it's pretty safe to assume that they are fearful of something, because the cover emotion is there for a reason. It is important that we understand what it is, that we allow the person, myself or the client, to feel it, and that we address it. But then we also have to go into the primary emotion and go through the same or similar process. So again, the reason why I was bringing this up is because it is one of the ways that you can start accessing the subconscious mind is through the cover emotions. And most of us in our society nowadays, at least in the Western world, most of us generally present with cover emotions, and I'm including myself in that, present with cover emotions. So trying to get into the primary emotion is a great way to start tapping into the subconscious mind, but it's also a great way to start helping yourself and others find relief.